All right, Nick, we have to stay very, very quiet. We're talking about a very, very action-packed, tension-filled film.
Yes.
We can't get too high. No, because today we're going to review A Quiet Place. Stay quiet. All right, Nick, today we're going to talk about A Quiet Place.
Yes.
The John Krasinski directed, John Krasinski starring, John Krasinski partially written horror tension film from Platinum Dunes from 2018. So I know I got my copy. I had to watch it again just recently because I'm kind of excited for the sequel.
I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast. Today we're going to talk about The Quiet Place, and this coming up, the reason why, because coming up, this is a sequel.
Yeah.
Before we got to a sequel, I really didn't want a sequel to this movie. It looks like not necessarily going to be a sequel. It looks like they're going to do some things about front and forward, future and past.
Mm-hmm.
So, great ending to it. It's a big success. I don't think a lot of people appreciate it for the horror content. Well, there's some little backlash to it as well. A little bit of it, like it's, when people like it.
It seems to me kind of like easy entry horror.
That's what
a lot because the hardcore people didn't care for it at the same time because I know it was released the same year as Hereditary, and I was getting a lot of people because I enjoyed both films. I was getting a lot of people that had seen Hereditary and they're like, no, this is horror. Quiet Place is kind of like entry,
Yeah.
And I take issue with that because I think there's a wide cater of horror films and certain people can handle certain levels, and I think this is a film that its horror is in the simplicity of the moment in the scenes. I was remarking with my wife when we were rewatching it actually that once you hit the 45-minute mark of the film, it's 45 minutes to an hour and a half nonstop.
Yes.
And it's one of the most tension-filled times I had at the theater. I know we were both remarking our times seeing it in the theater and how there was almost like this this unspoken rule, like do not speak. Like everybody stay as quiet as possible. Like anybody who took a little of a popcorn, like
you got to dissolve the popcorn in your mouth.
Yeah.
So you keep it quiet. But when you make a movie that's quiet, sound actually becomes more important in the movie than any other movie because you have to put the right placing of sound. So sound editing becomes even far more crucial. It's almost like a paradox. If we're going to make a movie that has a lot of sound, we have to put sound in there, but we have to emphasize it where it's the right time.
Yeah, because I think another thing where this film kind of hit the opposite was its one Academy Award nomination was Best Achievement in Sound Editing.
Yeah, which
people took issue with that too, and they're like, but it doesn't have sound. That's the point, though, is where do you put the sound to make it effective? And silence is, in a lot of ways, a sound. Like it's the absence of sound that creates this silence sound that you feel. And I think being able to remove as many elements as you can and just focus in on the visual, focus in on the rare sounds that you get a more exciting kind of experience for it. So.
The nice thing about this movie, it actually breaks one of the unwritten rules of American horror films, which is kids are victims. That plays a lot in the Asian horror movies. Usually Asian horror movies, everybody is up for grabs. But in America, we kind of this sacred thing that, and when I went to see it, I was like, there's never going to be any, the kids are fine. Which is a shock to him when you watch this movie.
There's a lot of danger lurking, and it does remind you that they are just as vulnerable as the adults.
Yes.
And I think there are a lot more moments where they're in more intense danger than the adults are even. They're both dealing with too, like being kids in this world. I think the film is set right around like day 480 something. So that's about a year and a little bit of change from when it happened. They're still very young. They've experienced their whole life leading up to this point not having to deal with this. This family is in a lot of ways blessed, though, too, and it's a really smart idea for John Krasinski to direct using a deaf actress playing a deaf character.
So I think they actually intentionally looked for somebody that had a cochlea implant.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they wanted somebody who could really be the character, really emphasize and that character in realistic sense. And I think that was a really smart choice, especially getting a child actor to do that because you're dealing with a lot more than just, the singular elements of it's a child, it's a deaf character, it's there's a lot more going on. It's nuanced in that way. We also get Noah Jupe as the son, and we have just seen him recently in films like Honey Boy, Ford v Ferrari, which you can check out our review for that as well.
Yeah.
Really strong casting for the kids. I was really impressed with that.
A movie like this, like you always, if the kids, like one of the best successful movies last year was Jojo Rabbit because the kids were so good into it.
Yeah.
So you really have to do extra careful of casting with kids in it. The other point that I want to make why this movie's so good is it plays on another thing. It was dramatic irony. We see something in the movie that the characters don't see or are not aware of, and then talk about in the cornfield. And that plays on it. It's a hard tool to use when you do writing. It's dramatic irony because it looks sometimes can be corny or something like that. When they do like in Spider-Man when Stan Lee is cleaning up and then there's a fight in the background. We see it, but Stan Lee's character did not know that was becoming in the movie.
Yeah, and it's attention you can give to the audience, or
Yeah.
the way you present with Spider-Man to a comedy that you can give to the audience. There's a level of usage where it becomes silly, and there's a level where it doesn't reach that. And I think this film gets close to that level. As much tension as you can wring from a sequence without
That's a great mark.
parodying itself.
That's what I was going to say. It's a challenge because dramatic irony, if you put it in, it can be comic even though you don't intention to be. And this does not play on comedy. They actually marked it pretty good.
Yeah.
Even though you're like, ugh, it does almost teeter to be silly.
Yeah, and I think what's so impressive about the film is its production design. And this is a film where you're not gonna get those really big accolades for production design, but everything visually in the film has to really emphasize the world as it is now.
Yeah.
And I think like all the things that we see in that first half of the film where they get all this great setup, this great world building, and everything in the background, if you find one thing out of place, one thing that doesn't make sense with trying to eliminate the sound, you pick it apart and you get there. And again, like getting close to that line. Like there's a great sequence where the kids are playing, I think it's a board game, it might be Monopoly, but they're using like felt pieces. And it's like that production design, that little piece right there reminds you of where they are, and getting close to that envelope of crossing it is having that the lamp that's there. Yes. And they're getting closer to touching it. You feel that little tension playing a board game. Which is really great. I think there's a lot of sequence too. Again, setting up the film so strong. You have a character who is pregnant, and you know that this is a ticking time bomb that is going to go off.
So it always builds up the increment of the building up to the climax. We know that this is actually why I appreciate the writing of it, because not only it breaks rules of American horror movies in the beginning, it has dramatic irony that's not necessarily comedic, but also plays on the development of climax. We know something's going to happen that's going to be traumatic, and they have to think of some way to resolve it. And we know it's not going to go over well.
Oh, exactly, yeah. And I think if you didn't have what Krasinski brought to the project, because the original screenplay, by Brian Wood Scott Beck, I think has one line of dialogue in the entire film. It's a much more like visceral event kind of film. Krasinski, when he brought into it, brought a little bit more of the character development, brought a little bit more of the family dynamic, which again leads you to care about these characters as if you were a member of this family. And I don't think we get our first spoken line of dialogue until 38 minutes into the movie. That's another really strong. People could get up and just be like, I'm done, I'm finished with this movie. But he holds you in and he makes you stick with it, which is really, really strong stuff. So I think just a bunch of great elements here. I think the score from Marco Beltrami, who's done a lot of work.
Yeah, something that gets largely neglected in horror movies that really needs to be carefully selected and carefully produced as music.
Yeah, because Beltrami, he hits those sweet moments, those tender moments, and that score is very memorable. When you finish the movie or when you go back to the movie, you hear that score and it's almost like being welcomed back into like an old friend's home. But then when you get that tension moment, Beltrami hits you hard with this really ratcheting score that is really strong all around. It's shot well, it's edited well. There's a lot of things I really, really enjoy about this movie.
There's a lot of balancing of different juxtapositions between somebody's vulnerabilities becomes their strength, and somebody's strengths becomes their vulnerability. So there's a lot of teeter-tottering of scripting and balancing out different characters that I really do like it. And I do love this ending.
I do too. I really do. And I think there's that element of luck to what they're dealing with.
Yeah.
Where they each have the correct skill set to make it through the event.
Yeah.
Millicent Simmons' character, of course, being deaf, means that this family has already learned some form of sign language, something to be able to communicate. This makes them lucky. And it's also a skill set that many times we think of as a detriment. Some people think of it as a detriment, but then you view it as like, this is a strength when it's put in the right, elements here. So I think it's finding that strength within, again, this younger character who's really struggling with her place. She blames herself for a lot of things going on in their past, and her father does love her but can't show it the right way he wants to. So giving her this moment where something that she believes even is an impediment shown off as a strength, it's a really cool element in the film, and it really again adds to that family nature of the whole thing. It's just a really strong movie all around.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it. Even though I was adamant about do not make a sequel to this movie, I think they are responding to, okay, it's not necessarily a sequel.
Yeah, and I think, I was reading a lot about the film because it just fascinates me so much. This John Krasinski is not really known for his horror or even his tension, really. He's Jim from The Office.
But I think that works for this movie.
Yeah.
That everybody, part of it's not really...
But he's mostly even directed. He directed 2 previous films and a couple episodes of The Office, but the films were mostly like dramedy. Really heavy into the comedy, but there's some drama elements in there. This is just a complete turn for what he's doing. And I think he said, of course, money talks, but he said he wasn't interested in doing another film unless he could come up with a good idea. Yeah. His wife, Emily Blunt, said she didn't want to do one unless she could trust his judgment, which is great. So hearing that he took some time away, came up with a cool idea, something he wanted to tell, is really kind of fascinating for me and it interests me. And of course, having her along for the ride too, picking up the film right after the first film ends, but also including some of the past. I think it's going to be a real world-building experience. I'm not expecting it to have the same impact with
That's
finale.
the other thing is people think that they're going to have the same impact, and I don't want a recycled storyline of we want to do the same. I don't want a formula.
Yep, and that's why I love the world-building aspect of adding some new characters. Yeah. They're kind of taking almost like a Walking Dead-ish aspect to it, where it's like sometimes human beings are the monsters. I think we're going to see in that sequel, whereas this film is so selective to the family. We see a couple of small characters, but really nobody who's named in the film. So.
Yeah, I like that emphasis that after the post-apocalyptic world, that people that usually endure it are people that are not good.
Yeah. And again, like this family has had some things that have actually set them up for a better track on it. Yeah. But will this world change them now? And I think, of course, let's get into a couple light spoilers because we finished the film. It's been out for 2 years. If you haven't seen it yet, pause us right now. Go watch it and then come back. Having the loss of the John Krasinski character is both interesting because we'll probably see in the flashback focus, but also having the addition of this new baby Abbott that is still going to be a baby in the sequel is going to be a really interesting track with how you utilize that. Again, a great production design with that prop, that box that she's going to be carrying. Yeah. I'm just very excited to see all the different elements, the ways you can tweak it and really show a different side of the world. There were rumors that the sequel would also be based in like other countries where they had landed.
Kind of like popcorn in her own.
Yeah, and how they would each deal with kind of the lack of sound in those countries. And I thought that would be kind of cool too. But this is an interesting way too. I think I trust them if they all came back to do something good because I think this film was really a surprise. And the worst thing you can do with a surprise is spoil it. So I think they would know if they made if they really came back and didn't care about the property, it might ruin the impact of the first film. So overall, Nick, I'm taking it as you're probably recommending it, but would you have a recommendation or not recommend for A Quiet Place?
I'm definitely recommend. It was, when it originally came out, it was like an honorable mention for movies. But it's just the captivating of an ending. I actually applaud people that make great endings to movies, and this one had a great ending to it.
Yep. The common Stephen King joke is that the ending is the hardest part, and whether or not you can accomplish it is sometimes completely up to luck even. But even I got a great tweet from Stephen King I wanted to read here. A Quiet Place is an extraordinary piece of work, terrific acting, but the main thing is the silence and how it makes the camera's eye open wide in a way few movies manage.
That was better said than when we took it. He did it in 2 sentences where we talk about it,
Yeah, but I think John Krasinski is very lucky to have such a high point of praise from a horror master. Yeah. It's going to be a recommendation for me as well. I think this film is a nearly perfect horror movie. Yeah. Couple of little tweaks that, in hindsight could have been changed, but overall, very, very tightly done. 90 minutes, doesn't drag on for too long. It is just really tight, good, meaty kind of a film. Yeah. I definitely recommend checking it out. Definitely before you see the second one. Check out this movie when you can. It's totally worth your time. That's all for us today, guys. I'm Kyle Goethe, and you can find my reviews on goatfilmreviews.com, or you can follow me online at Almighty Goatman.
And I'm Nick from the St. Paul Filmcast, where you can find us on the iTunes, Spotify, Stitcher, and Google Play, where we interview local filmmakers from the Twin Cities area.
All right, that's it for us today, guys. Well, until next time, stay quiet.